Thank goodness we're not the name. Om Sahanā-Vavatu Sahanā Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Hi. Om Below Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai, for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Jai. Okay, so we pick up here. The questions. Questions are threefold, really. First is related to bondage or suffering. What in reality is this bondage? How did it begin? In what is it rooted? And how is one set free from it? That's the first part of the question. So we can say bondage, and it seems that we are bound to suffer. So we can also say that the question has to do with suffering. The second is, what is the non-Atman? And we discussed yesterday. Atman is a very foreign word to us. The best way, one of the best ways to approach it is as I, but not I with attributes. Not I as in this or this, but the experiential I, which is said to be one with or same, non-different from Brahman or the Absolute. So, what is the non-I, or Atman? What is the supreme I, or Atman? And how can one discriminate between them? That's the third question. Please answer me. So those are the questions. What is the suffering? What is the cause of it? When did it begin? How to be free of it? And then second, as it relates to the real I, which I hear exists and is in unity with the Supreme, please describe what's not and what is, and tell me how to discriminate between the two. Those are the questions. Okay? Jai? Oh, okay. Now, the teacher, and we discussed yesterday, the teacher extols the student. We talked about why. Why? Because those are the questions. We live this life either thinking we know the answer and not asking so many questions, or the questions generally are about fulfillment of the sense gratifications or how to avoid ragadvesha, caught up in this ragadvesha, and we discuss as we go through. But here the questions are questions that lead towards freedom if the answers are understood. So the questions that are asked are really the most important questions. The Buddha was very clear, and Buddha is a very good example for us because Buddha didn't even talk about Brahman. Buddha just focused on suffering and how to be free of suffering. And that's really it. And so here Shankaracharya equates understanding of self with freedom from suffering. So it gets expanded a little bit, but still relates to the same thing. How can I be free of suffering? How important is that question? How important is the answer? You see, we've kind of been nipping at it all of this time, but we never got to the real question. And so the teacher raves about the student because he's asked the right question. And he says, because you've asked the right question, you can have the answer and be free. So, now, let's take a minute. Because he goes from there, from glorifying the student, as it were, to now speaking to how one can be free from suffering. And here he speaks of self-effort and discernment. And so we'll pick up the discussion from yesterday here. Study of the scriptures is fruitless as long as Brahman has not been experienced. And when Brahman has been experienced, it is useless to read the scriptures. So what he's sharing with us is very important, that normally when we ask a question or we have an interest in something, there's a process of mental gratification. We relate to being so mind enraptured and mind captured. We relate to the answer as being something that I want to know mentally. Can you tell me how to get to the 7-Eleven? That's a typical question. And then the answer will be a set of instructions on how to get to the 7-Eleven. But it's actually the experience of the 7-Eleven that's desired. Can you tell me what honey tastes like? And there's no answer to that. All you can say in terms of a description is, here, taste it. Right? So everything we're doing is actually for the experience of the thing, and in this way, this is no different. But the tendency is to get stuck in the mental aspect of it, and then, of course, ego sense will immediately assert, okay, I know. Also, the ego sense is protecting the idea of self. And so we get stuck here, where we want to pretend that I know in order to be seen a certain way. And that's very subtle and very deep. And so the first point here that the teacher makes is, you can study all you wish. I want you to understand that the goal and the requirement is actually to experience what we're talking about, not just to hear about it. So, And so that wants to be understood, because typically we will approach a subject like we do the subjects in school in order to pass a test, a written test or something like this, and to say, I know. But in this case, he wants to be very clear that's not the goal here. To say Brahman and to say everything is Brahman, beautiful, but that's not the goal. A network of words is like a dense forest which causes the mind to wander hither and thither. See if that makes sense, what he's sharing. A network of words is like a dense forest which causes the mind to wander here and there. Look and see how the mind works. Yeah. We're dealing with the mind, which is one of the ways to refer to it is symbolic, meaning nama-rupa. Where there's a word, the mind tries to put that word in the light of its own experience, which is a limited experience. So if the word bill comes, the mind is trying to bring forth an image, a bill, as a way to understand it. But it only brings forward the bill that it knows already. Yeah? And so when there are many words, the mind can end up in a place of quandary. So a dense forest. Words are a dense forest. And you see here, they're arguing about the meaning of words. All of the arguments are based in misunderstanding. And the question is, how deep is the misunderstanding? Ultimately, the misunderstanding goes to, who am I? But along the way, somebody says, Christian. And the mind will grasp its own conditioned understanding of the word Christian. And then it will, with the ego sense, it will fight to defend it. But every mind would have a different understanding of the word, because every individual is having a different experience. So, is that resonating?
So when we're talking, so I'm saying a word, obviously it's going to be like it's gonna bring to the mind whatever the person has in his like.
It will.
expressions.
It will. Yeah, it will.
But otherwise, if I shut that down, then I just hear like a sound vibration. Then I'm not really listening.
No, we're going to talk about meditation on Vedanta. We'll discuss that this morning. That's really the intention here. So you can do neither of those.
Right.
You have to be present for it, and you have to be present for what the mind comes with, but you have to go beyond it. Mm-hmm. If you try to shut it down, you'll miss the whole darn thing. Yeah. You'll miss all of it. But if you believe what the mind says, you'll miss it.
Right.
Recognize you're dealing with just a conditioned instrument. That voice that's arising within the mind that's saying, I know, that's simply, that's the ego sense, false sense. And also the idea of Bill is false. So you can know that in conscious mind, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so we discussed how to work with it. Okay. The idea of Bill can't be trusted as Bill. There's a deeper meaning, something deeper. Okay, a network of words is like a dense forest which causes the mind to wander hither and thither. Therefore, those who know this truth should struggle hard to experience Brahman. So he gives you the answer. If you know the way words are, and if you know the way the conditioned mind works with them, if you know that and you want the truth, then what to do? Struggle hard to experience Brahman. Okay, I'll give you an example. I'm not going to name the particular sutra, but there was a sutra in Bhagavad Gita. When I heard it, I was with Swami Ramaswarupanandaji Maharaj. When I heard it, it resonated with me, but I didn't understand why it resonated. Somehow I knew that there was something to it that I needed to understand. Does that make any sense? Have you ever had that kind of experience with something? And Krishnadas? You wandered off for a minute, but here's what I'm sharing. When I was studying Bhagavad Gita with Swami Ramaswarupananda.
I heard.
Okay.
I don't know if I've had an experience like that.
Okay, got it. Very good. So, something that you really want to understand, for some reason you really want to understand it. You feel it important to understand it, but you know that you don't understand it. Okay. And if it feels very important, and this felt very important, so I would sit with it. And this for days, this was the practice. When I had quote unquote free time, I would sit with that and I would beat myself on it and say, what does this mean? And I'd say, what does this mean? And I would repeat it again. I'd read it again. What does this mean? There's something here. I know there's something here. So this is what he's talking about, struggling hard. Don't give up. Don't give up. A few weeks, I was sitting and I was given an experience which illumined that particular teaching. And so I knew what it meant. The conditioned mind itself was incapable because the conditioned mind was continuing to assert the same stuff, but I didn't accept it. I knew that wasn't the answer. The meditation that the teacher is speaking of here is like this. When he says struggle hard to experience it. Now, it depends upon how important. Okay, many years prior, there was a girl that I wanted to have a friendship with, and maybe something more. But she ignored me. She didn't pay any attention to me whatsoever. And so in my childish ways, what did I do? I did exactly the same thing. Have you never done that? Because it was so important. It occupied first position in young Swami prior names life. At that particular point in time. Have you ever experienced something like that, where you wanted something so badly that you kept thinking about it? Yes? Okay, very good. Now we're there. And so what did I do? I kept breaking my head about it, right? I kept thinking about it. And an idea would come, and I would roll the idea around in my mind. And I would see if it might work. It finally did. It finally did work. We became friends at the time. And so, but that was it. Now, who came up with the solution? As I reflect back, I could say, Guru. Or something like that. Because it wasn't something that existed in my own conditioned mind. Yeah? Okay. And the thing was that was the most important. So there's a corollary to this as we relate to it. The corollary is, look at what's most important to you. At the moment that I realized, wait a second, all I ever wanted was to be happy. At that very moment, it's as if I was given a key with which to unlock the secret of life. And now I realize all of the stuff I was doing doesn't do it. So I was able to renounce much of it, not all of it. I tried to renounce all of it. Some of the habits were still so strong, but cleared the plate a bit. And then I started a contemplation on happiness. And where is it? And started reading more and more. Yeah, and listening. And like this, with what? What was the most important thing at that point? Well, that morphed into knowing God and experiencing God. It became that because the answer to that question came. Know thyself, or know God, and so that became the most important thing. And at that point in time, I said to the Lord, all I want is to know you and to serve you. So know you, reveal yourself to me, help me to know you, and help me to serve you. And that became the most important. So the parallel here is, what is the most important? Consider what is the most important. What I discovered about this life was that I was living according to a conditioned idea of what was most important. If that makes any sense. But I found the conditioned idea false. And so I began to learn to set it aside. Right? That's not it. I would hear it. Some girl, or some car, or some amount of money, or something like that. I would hear it. No, that's not it. We know that's not it. So that's discernment. So the question of what is most important, because what is most important is what we will contemplate in the way that the teacher is describing here. And if it is the most important, truly, life or death, then we will contemplate it until the answer comes. And the answer has to be experiential. That's what I'm sharing. This Bhagavad Gita shloka that I was contemplating, that I kept coming back to, and kept repeating, and kept asking, and racking the brain, as it were, on what it means. The answer was not there, but the focus on it, the importance of it, somehow called forward, an experiential answer. And with the experience of it, we got it.
Do you remember what sloka it was?
I'm not going to say, but I'll tell you the experience, because I don't want people just to go to that shloka, because that's not it. But I will say that the experience was stepping back as the observer, and the direct experience of the separation between the I and the mind. So I was able to clearly see the contemplation itself that was happening, and that was the experience that answered the question that we had. Okay. When a man has been bitten by the snake of ignorance, he can only be cured by the realization of Brahman. What use are the Vedas or scriptures, charms, or herbs? And a tendency that we'll also have, that we see, is when we say experience needs to happen, is we'll just wait for the experience. But what the teacher here is sharing is brutally important, because the experience, okay, might happen, but you might completely miss it because it's not. There may not be a context for it. Only when there is the question and the effort to understand the answer to the question, it's the preparation, as it were, for the light, for the sun dawning. Otherwise, if I would have had that experience but not the question, I would have had no context for it. Yeah? Because experience is just an experience. Otherwise. We have experiences all the time. Sorry?
Sometimes the experience causes you to question and to seek, like, what.
Yeah, it does. Exactly. Beautiful. Yes. Yes. So I can't speak to it. I can say it happened the way it happened. From my way of seeing, I could say that it seemed to happen because of the question and because of racking myself for it and because of the importance of it. Okay. So, until you allow this apparent universe to dissolve from your consciousness, until you have experienced Brahman, how can you find liberation just by saying the word Brahman? The result is merely a noise. Until a man has destroyed his enemies and taken possession, another allegory, and taken possession of the splendor and wealth of the kingdom, he cannot become king by simply saying, I am king. A buried treasure is not uncovered by merely uttering the words come forth. You must follow the right directions, dig, remove the stones and earth from above it, and then make it your own. In the same way, the pure truth of the Atman, which is buried under Maya, and the effects of Maya can be reached by meditation, contemplation, and other spiritual disciplines, such as a knower of Brahman may prescribe, but never by subtle arguments. Therefore, the wise must personally exert all their powers to get liberation from the bondage of the world, just as they would personally take remedies against physical ailments. Okay. If that's helpful. Now, the question you have asked today is a very good one. It is relevant to the teachings of the scriptures. Its meaning is hidden deep as within an aphorism. It should be asked by all who seek liberation. Listen attentively, O prudent one, to what I say. By listening, you shall certainly be liberated from the bonds of the world. Shravana. Of the steps to liberation, the first is declared to be complete detachment from all things which are non-eternal. Then comes the practice of tranquility, self-control, and forbearance. These are practices of the 6 that we've had on the board the last couple of days. And then the entire giving up of all actions which are done from personal, selfish desire. So the discontinuance of doing for me as an individual. For what purpose? To free myself from bondage. Then the disciple, but he's giving it in order. Then the disciple must hear the truth of the Atman, reflect on it, and meditate upon it constantly without pause for a long time. Thus, the wise man reaches the highest state in which consciousness of subject and object is dissolved away, and the infinite unitary consciousness alone remains, and he knows the bliss of nirvana while still living on earth. This contemplation and meditation that he's talking about here, it wants to be in our life. We have duties and responsibilities. We need to continue to do them, whatever they are. The contemplation and meditation wants to be in our life. It's not the meditation where we sit and go into the depth. It's not that. It's a living meditation. I'll give you an example. We'll do this practice, and you can choose whether to do it or not, Hari. And the practice, and I think you have as well, and Krishnadas you have, but we can do it, and then for everyone we'll talk about how we might apply that in day-to-day life. So if we can take our hand and place it on the knee or the thigh, and just try to be super aware as we do this. So we can lift it up and then turn it, look at it, and then place it back down. And the question is, what are you aware of actually doing? And Hari knows the first because you chose. Yeah. And I look at Hari and laugh about it because as a group we've done this a number of times. But one day Hari chose not to.
I think it was more than once.
Because something said I already know the answer. So, what are you aware of actually doing? What's the first?
Intention.
Okay, but before that.
Before that.
Yeah, before setting the intention. What?
Choosing.
Choosing. So that's discernment. That's vivek. It's very important. And then past that, what did you do? Any of you? Anyone? You said it. You said an intention, right? Relatively strong or relatively weak? But you said an intention. Yeah? So, as if you willed the hand, and then you will it to turn, and you will yourself to look at it, yeah, and then you will it back down. Is that consistent with your experience? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I'm just offering the words. But is that consistent with it? Or is it different than that in some way?
Choose, and then choose to observe.
Yeah, choose, and what we call doing or doership, we don't know about. Really, in the situation that we're in, we don't know about. Because you might have some feeling, do you, Krishnadas, as the movement is happening? Are you aware of feeling in the limbs?
Yeah.
Feeling in the muscles?
Yeah.
But you don't have the perception of actually doing it, correct? You're more experiencing that feeling in them. In other words, there's not any conscious process about which muscles to move.
Yeah, it's just muscle memory.
Yeah, so we can use the word muscle memory, which is a universal factor. Any way we approach the actual doing of it, it's universal factors that we don't understand. We don't understand how muscle memory works. But it's a universal factor because every single being here engages in it. So I can't say it's mine. So I experience sensations from it. And the teaching actually shares this. All of the teachings, all the scriptural teachings in every tradition, they relate to two factors: viveka, or power of choice, discernment, discrimination, however we call it, and self-effort, purusharta, or willpower. We get into discussions about my will, God's will, like that. We can even look at God's will with this, because we can say, did you ever break your arm? Did you ever have your arm in a cast? Krishna does. Right? Yeah, you did. So you remember that after getting the cast off, trying to do that, and it's a good example, because I'm sure that it moved some initially, right? But not very much. Yeah? Is that your experience?
Yeah, I was a kid.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Do you remember the exertion that you had to make in order to get it to move at all? Do you remember it wasn't easy to move and you had to really struggle with it to get it to move?
I don't remember that now.
Okay.
I remember it was like really long. It felt like really long arm.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Here's the direct memory here, because it happened often. Is that it atrophies some, the muscles atrophy and such, and it's like kind of stone-ish. It just seems to want to stay like this if it was in a cast like this, and a few times it would be like that.
Right.
So, and then they take the cast off and it wants to be here. And in order to get it to move, a strong exertion.
Yeah.
And the exertion is done with will.
Struggle to experience.
You struggle to experience, yeah. That exertion is done with will. So in other words, I have self-effort. It's clear, because I can sit there, I can choose, okay, it's time now, I'm going to work with it. I'm going to try my best to move it. So I can tell myself that, yeah? Which is a choice that I've made. And then, now I'm doing it right now. I'm going to tighten the muscles. So that's just a question of choosing. I have no idea how to tighten this muscle. Really? How could I know that? And the function of it is a universal function.
God's will.
So my capacity to do this is limited according to some universal mechanism, which we can call God's will. So I can struggle, I can assert, but then the actual movement of it, you see some movement, or I see some movement. And that movement, as it were, is limited by some universal factor. We call it God's will. But everything we're engaged in is one or the other of these. It's either choice and self-effort. They always go together too. That's why willpower or purusharta is extolled, and that's why viveka is extolled. So what do I choose to exert? Yeah? And the rest of it is the more you look at it, the more you'll see it's universal factors that we're dealing with, because there's nothing, the rest of this, there's nothing here that's mine.
Nothing that is not God.
Yeah, and even the willpower, even I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, we talk about grace, and purusharta, or self-effort, is grace. The first grace is vivek, discernment, and the second grace is purusharta, or self-effort, because those are universal also. They're also universal factors. But somehow they're placed in the hands of the jiva, the individual, the apparent individual, to work with. Yeah? So now, if we see that, then now we go through the day. This is this meditation. It's just an example of it. There are many different ways to approach it. But we go through the day, we're doing our duties, etc. Do we actually take time to recognize what's happening as we're going through our duties? Mm-hmm. Do we take time to remember, to contemplate on what's happening? What is the doing of this duty? Am I really the doer here? It's a good contemplation. Yeah? This is the contemplation meditation. This is the nididhyasana, where we're actually working with the teachings in our own being according to the purity or not of the intellect, according to the purity or not of self-effort, but even these questions and the contemplation of. And here, we step into tomorrow morning the 3 bodies and the 5 sheaths. And we're given teachings on the nature of the bodies. What are the bodies? What are they made of? And so we'll hear, for example, that the physical sheath, the physical body, is made of food. And now, can we contemplate that in our day-to-day life? Can we see if it's true or not? Yeah? And that its path, birth, decay, death, that it consists of the gross senses and the gross organs of action, etc. We'll discuss, we'll step through. And then do we have the ability to actually contemplate this? And why bother? Well, I'm dealing with something. I'm dealing with a habit that has nothing to do with any conscious desire whatsoever. In fact, consciously, I don't want anything to do with that habit. Huh? But it remains a habit, and it's very subtle, and it can insert itself. And so, in the conscious mind, I know something. But in the subconscious, in the conditioned, there's still some different apparent knowing, which is not real, which is false, which is not beneficial in any way, shape, or form, which can lead to poor behaviors, which can influence others in negative ways. And so we see it. Now, do you suppose it'll just go away if I ignore it? It will not. I can assure you it will not. In fact, more likely is it will become stronger. Because habits have a tendency to assert themselves. That's why they're called habits. And they assert themselves very subtly. Yeah. And you have a habit of identifying with the body, with the physical body. You have a habit of identifying with the physical body. I can say that because every single being here has that habit. But when you discover that you are not the physical body, are you automatically cured? No. And so this is the contemplation meditation that's being prescribed. This is nididhyasana, where now you live it, you bring it into your day, you bring it into your life, you bring it into the performance of duty. You actually bring it forward, you contemplate it, you consider it, you reflect on it. Experiences will come. And as a result of the importance, we can say, as a result of the questioning, as a result of the process, how important is it? Oh, okay. So we'll break there for the morning. Would you please check? Questions? Jagadisha, Krishnadas? Questions, comments? I'm not even saying it should be the most important question. Interestingly enough, I'm not. But we all reach a point where where this question about recurrent suffering becomes very important. And there is where Vedanta is to be studied and practiced. Oh. Okay. So we'll close final prayers in Arati, page 156. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyamamritat Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sorry, we can do the full final prayer. Om Sahanā-Vavatu Sahanā Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto Thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchit Ananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold Thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve Thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember Thee. Let us ever sing Thy glories. Let Thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in Thee forever and ever. Om Bolo Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai, for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Jai.